Today, we're talking about the world of Fallout. Vault-Tec told people exactly what they wanted to hear. When the bombs fell, these giant steel shelters were supposed to save America, preserve families, and give humanity a second chance. That is the image most people remember: a giant vault door, a smiling mascot, and the promise that somewhere underground, civilization would survive. But Fallout's greatest twist is that the vaults were never just shelters. They were laboratories, and the people locked inside them, they were the test subjects. By the time Fallout 2 pulled the curtain back, the truth was ugly. President Richardson flat out says the vaults worked almost exactly the way they were supposed to. Some opened early. Some had impossible living conditions. Some were built to test psychology, others biology, others simple human desperation. Even the existence of control vaults tells you how clinical this whole system was. Vault-Tec did not just want survivors. It wanted data. Start with Vault 11, because this is the one that tells you exactly what kind of evil Vault-Tec was capable of. Imagine being told your entire community could survive, but only if one person willingly walked to their death every year. That was the system. Residents turned overseer elections into sacrificial lotteries, and over time, politics became murder with paperwork. Then comes the punchline. Once the last survivors finally refused to keep killing each other, Vault-Tec congratulated them. They had passed. The door was unlocked. In other words, the real experiment was seeing how long ordinary people would keep obeying before choosing basic human decency. Then there's Vault 22, which was sold as a miracle agricultural project. The pre-war sign talks about staple crops, scientific progress, even a fertilizer that could help fight hunger. What the sign does not mention is the spores. By the time you reach the place in New Vegas, the entrance has already been vandalized with the perfect warning: stay out, the plants kill. And that is not exaggeration. The Vault's own records describe airborne infections, fungal growth in human lungs, and spores spreading so aggressively that explorers worry the research could threaten the NCR itself. Vault-Tec tried to engineer better life underground and ended up creating a greenhouse from hell. If Vault 22 is biological horror, Vault 75 is institutional horror. Publicly, it was supposed to protect children during a nuclear event. In reality, adults were separated and disposed of on arrival, while the children became subjects in a long-term human improvement program. The terminals say it outright: refinement of the human genome through selective breeding, hormonal treatments, genetic modification, and accelerated generations. And when the kids got older, the best performers were not rewarded. They were harvested. Vault-Tec wrapped a eugenics program in the language of school, safety, and graduation. That is what makes this one so nasty. Vault 95 may be the cruelest because it feels the most believable. The idea sounds almost kind at first. Gather recovering addicts in a controlled environment and help them stay clean. For 5 years, it even worked. Then the real experiment began. A hidden resident was ordered to open a secret stash of chems and simply watch what happened. The logs after that are brutal. People relapse immediately. Fighting breaks out. Gunshots echo through the vault. One resident realizes too late that Vault-Tec never meant to save them at all. It wanted to know what temptation would do once hope had finally taken root. Vault 106 goes after the mind instead of the body. Residents were told not to panic if they noticed an odd smell or taste in the air, because apparently the filtration system had a slight irregularity. Behind the scenes, security was told a gas release was underway, and nobody even knew the full effects. The result, by the time you find the place in Fallout 3, is pure psychological collapse. Hallucinations, paranoia, broken reality. Vault 106 is what happens when a living environment itself becomes a weapon. You are not just exploring a failed shelter. You are walking through the ruins of a chemical breakdown. Vault 108 is one of Fallout's strangest experiments because it hides its horror behind a meme. Most people remember one word, Gary. But the vault was destabilized long before the clones took over. Archived records describe a design where normal positions were left unfilled. The main power supply was set to fail early, and the overseer was chosen with a fatal cancer risk. Then, somehow, the place ended up running repeated cloning attempts on Gary, and the logs show the same result over and over again. Each new clone remained violently hostile to non-clones. So yes, Vault 108 is funny for about 3 seconds. Then you realize it is really a story about a system collapsing into repetition, mutation, and absurd violence. Vault 81 is different. This is the almost experiment. Its hidden mission was to research infectious disease, antibodies, radiation-era mutation, and potentially use the residential population for Stage 3 human trials. But the Overseer saw exactly where that road was heading and refused to let the main Vault population become test animals. That is why Vault 81 is still standing in any meaningful sense. The secret lab still produced the horrors you find later. Infected mole rats, the only cure. Curie's research. But the full-scale human testing Vault-Tec wanted never truly happened. And somehow, that makes it sadder. This is proof the system could have been stopped if enough people inside it still had a conscience. Vault 34 is less elegant and more explosive. The core idea was simple. Too many weapons, not enough room, and a community under pressure. Whether you focus on the original experiment concept from the Fallout Bible or the fully canon collapse in New Vegas, the end result is the same. Tensions rise. The Overseer starts talking population control. Riots break out. The armory becomes the center of conflict. The reactor gets damaged. Radiation floods the vault. By the time you arrive, the place is basically a civil war fossilized in concrete, still glowing from the decisions the residents made decades earlier. And then there is Vault 111, the one millions of Fallout players walk through themselves. The horror here is how clinical it is. The residents were unaware human subjects in a cryogenic suspension test. Staff were told not to break suspension, even to save lives, were reminded that they were expendable, and were ordered to dispose of extra detainees once the pods were sealed. The people inside were not saved. They were stored. That one shift in language changes the whole opening of Fallout 4. The elevator, the freezing chamber, waking up alone. None of it was a miracle. It was the single survivor crawling out of a dead experiment. What makes the vaults unforgettable is that each one turns the same promise into a different kind of betrayal. Safety becomes manipulation. Order becomes control. Science becomes cruelty. Sometimes Vault-Tec attacked the body. Sometimes it attacked the mind. Sometimes it just stepped back and watched people destroy each other all on their own. And that might be the most disturbing part of all. Fallout is full of monsters, but the scariest thing in the series was never outside the vault door. It was the people who designed the world behind it. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and like the video. See you in the next one.